Welcome to the Archway of Hope podcast. My name is Chip Wilson, and I will be your host, where we cover things from loss, grief, and providing hope for those who have lost someone too early. You know, I remember back when I met Jimmy and Lorna through Charity Champions, and Jimmy said something that was so profound to me that started, I think, a lot of this, and that was, you know, there's somebody right now having a normal day, life is just plugging along, and tomorrow morning they're going to wake up and their life is going to change forever, and they don't know it. And that happened to my family. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, that could be me or anybody I know, just my normal day, just plugging along, this life as we know it, and tomorrow is going to be drastically different. And that kind of started some of this. And so, you know, Christy, when somebody like Jimmy finds you, where do you typically start the process? I mean, you just found out, he finds you, where do you start?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing that I would want to know is, what has your experience been? You know, what happened? And so, you know, even for right now, I would say, you know, take us back to that day. What do you remember that day when you woke up? You know, what was your day like? Who were you in that moment, and what did that feel like to you?
Well, it's interesting that you would ask, because looking back, I can go back and think about those things that were happening. But what's weird is, even in that moment before, for example, I got the call and my world changed at approximately 2:30 p.m. on December 28, 2015. Even before that occurred, I still knew that I was in a struggle of life already. And so if my day begins, as it did on most days, I was in a time of life at work where I was under extreme pressure with a couple of cases. And one of them was really bearing down on me. And it had gotten to the point where I had become a person that I didn't really like, because I was spending all of my hours at work. I always had believed that I was a pretty good dad and a pretty good husband because I had a pretty good work-life balance. I was able to spend time with my kids, spend time with my wife in a way that seemed to keep us all together. But over the prior 6 months, beginning in June of 2015, that stopped. And so I was in a place where I start my day at my home desk really early, and I was journaling. And this is really what kicked off another one of my real problems that following Rhett's death I had to overcome. So I'm journaling, and my journaling is usually my talks with God. Really, that's what it was about. And I remember writing in a red pen, God, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way for me to live this life. There's got to be a better way for me to do things, because I had gotten to a point where I was spending inordinate amounts of time at work to the exclusion of everything else.
This is on the morning of,
yes,
that you just, before you even had any inclination.
That's right. I just knew that I was off. But looking back now, it doesn't haunt me now, but it haunted me for a really long time, as I ended that journal with, Lord, please bless today Ryan, Rhett, and Mara, my 3 kids, because I was praying for them specifically. And I ended it with, Lord, bless Ryan, Rhett, and Mara. So even today, I have that journal, and it's rare that I can pick it up because I still struggle. You know, it's part of the spirituality of it. I still ask, where was God and all that? I had a really hard struggle. So that's where my day began. I didn't know that would become such a pivotal point in my life as I wrote that sentence. So I go to work, and we were 2 days away from this pretrial of this case that I was working on, that covered up in, and frantically working with lots of lawyers and lots of phone calls and emails and lots of just frantically working. And I got a phone call at approximately 2:30 from a very close friend, and we'll just mention his name. It was David Lillard. And David, if you ever get to hear this, I've got to confess that even today, when I look down on my phone and David Lillard calls me in the afternoon, I go to a place that's not good.
Yeah.
That just
It's forever a trigger for you.
When I look at my cell phone and I see that, it takes my breath away for a second. It really does. So David calls, which he rarely does, but on occasion. And when he called, there was this sheer panic in his voice. There really was. It was something about, Jimmy, you got to get home. But it was much louder than that. I mean, it was, Jimmy, you got to get home. You got to get, and I'm immediately, what, as any person would. And he said, it's Rhett. I said, what about Rhett? Well, he's been in a really bad accident. What are you talking about? And I don't remember because the chaos began to start. And he mentioned something about the ATV. He's been in an ATV accident. And I said, how bad is it? Is he okay? And he goes, all he would tell me is that it's bad. And I'm getting up out of the desk, leaving everything behind, walking out the door. I remember running down the stairwell, and I'm still talking to him. How bad is it? What do you mean it's bad? And looking back, I'm pretty certain he already knew Rhett was dead. So.
And how far was your drive from your office home?
22 minutes on a normal day. That day, probably 15 minutes. Because I remember squealing out of the parking lot, hitting 5th Street to the interstate, and I mean, flashers on. Because he still didn't tell me. I still didn't know. I just have this glimmer of hope that's fainting as each moment and as each question about how bad is it. And
if I get there fast enough, maybe I can fix it.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I thought if I get there fast enough, I thought I would be driving up and the ambulances would be picking him up, and I would really be ending up following an ambulance to a hospital. So I get on the interstate. I remember the place. I don't remember any landmarks, but finally I'm hollering into the phone, David, you got to tell me. And I finally asked the question. Instead of asking how bad is it, I finally asked the question, David, is he alive? Silence. And my voice gets louder. David, is he alive? And I'm screaming by now, David, is he alive? You got to tell me. And in a pause, he finally says, no.
And that pause probably had already told you exactly what you needed to know.
Yeah. Already known. Already known.
Yeah. And, interestingly enough, Paul here also is a part of this story in a way, as a friend. And, I'm wondering in that moment for you as an auxiliary person in this story, what that moment was like for you. What do you remember about that day?
Well, I'm sure that my part in the story is similar to a lot of other friends that Jimmy and Lorna have, is that when you get there, of course, we had heard something was going on. We were trying to figure that out as well. And as we kind of went through the next hour or so after we got a call that something had happened, we started putting pieces of the puzzle together that something's not right. This is not going well. So it's already in your mind. And then we arrive on the scene.
So wait a second, Paul. Are you saying that when you first got a call or a notice, you didn't really know that he was dead either?
No, Lorna was the one that texted me. No, she called me. She called me and she said, Paul, something happened to Red. He's been in an accident. I don't know how bad it is. And can you find out what's going on? But can you get home? So me and a friend, Mike Pascal, who was an important part of getting the revolution started, we got together and we checked hospitals around here. We actually went to hospitals because when you're in an accident, you go to a hospital. Well, Red was not at the hospitals.
So everybody's activated on this child is still alive.
Right.
We've just got to find where he is and get there and fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make it okay.
Make it okay. And that's the part I wanted to get to, is that when you get there and you find out what really happened, as a friend and as a close friend, you start thinking, well, I'm here. Surely I can say something or do something to make this better, even though it's horrible. And you realize when you get there, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say, even though you're like family.
The worst thing possible has happened, and there's nothing you can do. The only thing you can do as a friend is actually just be present. And that's what we saw was people coming to the house and just basically sitting there with them for hours in silence as they tried to start processing what had happened. It's an interesting moment. I would even say it's kind of a holy moment, because all you have to offer is just to be there. Because nothing else you have to offer will fix anything.
Yeah, and that dynamic is also a weird balance, right? Because here, the people that lost their child are hurting in one way, but then people that care about this child and have supported this child in, a peripheral manner, right? They're hurting too. And to not put that grief and compound it on top of the people that are in the the epicenter of it all, and to understand where you are, that's a really, tenuous balance there, to not make it about you,
Exactly.
but you're hurting really bad as well.
And inside you realize after a while, wow, their lives just changed forever. And because their lives just changed forever, mine did too.
But it's not about me.
It's not about me.
But it feels really bad.
Something's different here.
So what do I do?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and so then that comes back, for you. You arrive.
Yeah. So one of the things I really remember after David finally confirming yes is someone grabbed the front phone from him. And I thought, and was yelling back at David. And it turned out that it was our chief of police at the time, and he and I were friends. Steve Foster. He was the chief of police at McGregor at the time. And he was telling David, you can't tell him that, because I'm sure he was concerned at that point for my safety. What was I going to do? I'm on the road driving 120 miles an hour with my flashers on, and I've just been told my son is dead. And I can still remember it all, but I can't describe the feeling. It's just total chaos in your brain, and you just can't do anything. And the chief is asking me, where are you? And I'm trying to describe, and he says, pull over, get off the road. And I said, no, I'm coming. And so by the time I get to Highway 84, he has met me. And so he's waiting for me in the ditch, and he turns around, and he's got the lights on of his police car. And he escorts me to 488 Windsor Road, which is my driveway.
So when David confirmed your biggest fear, did your foot back off the pedal, go down and go faster? Was there just a sense of...
No, faster. But it felt like a recklessness, though. Immediately to the point that I didn't... this sounds bad, didn't care, had no concern for myself or maybe even anyone else around me who I could have been putting in danger by driving as fast and as out of control as I was at the time.
Because your life just was thrown into chaos. The concern for others kind of diminished.
And self-included.
And I wonder, too, in that moment, if there is an unconscious...
That's what it felt like.
Aspect
really
of
good way
it.
of putting it, unconscious. I still remember it, but nothing that you are thinking makes any sense. Nothing.
But it's justifiable. A justifiable chaos, because you just got news about Rhett. So in your mind, it's like,
yeah, who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah, nothing else. Yeah, who cares? That's how a lot of life became after that, by the way. Who cares?
Well, and as you're traveling there and you're finding this out and you're trying to make it there to fix things, and then you find out that it doesn't matter how fast you drive or what you're doing to get there, or if you make it in 5 minutes or 25 minutes or never, it doesn't change a thing.
There's nothing you can fix.
And that recklessness, it makes you just ponder a little bit, like, am I taking that reckless approach? Because if he's not here, then what am I?
Not of much value. to finish that sentence, that's how I felt. Not of much value. What's the use? We could spend, and then we probably will, lots of times in another podcast of dealing with why am I still here? And so that's part of probably what I was thinking at the time, and getting there as fast as I was, and maybe even as reckless as I was. You begin to think automatically of why? What's the use?
And you were already
How's life
pondering
gonna
that.
go on? Yeah.
You know, at that morning, you were already,
Yeah, just
What-
very...
what's my purpose? Where am I going from here? What am I doing with my life?
Yeah, but I thought I was about to make my life a lot better. I was really on a road beginning at 6 o'clock that morning. I thought I was about to really get with God, and I was going to fix my life. I was about to put things back into balance. Little did I know, my life was about to be a total disaster.
So anywhere along that, David's giving you the news and you feel out of control and chaos, when did you come back to, I have a wife, kids, others? When did that come back?
Yeah, not until after I arrived, to ambulances, police cars, fire trucks, all in the ditch, and I'm running through them all, and nobody's moved Rhett yet, which now I'm really thankful for. Really thankful for, because I got to lay with him, and that seems a little morbid, but that's what I got to do. I got to lay with Rhett in the road. And I got to run my fingers through his hair one last time. And after laying there for, I don't know, it seemed like a long time. Maybe it wasn't, but it seemed like a long time. I remember it dawning on me that I can't lay here forever. And to answer the question I think about then, I started asking, where were people? Of course, the first question was, where was Lorna?
Mm-hmm.
And then, where is Ryan? And I got the answer, I think, where Ryan was. Yeah, he was in the house, and my dad came and got him through the pastor, by the way, because Ryan had no business seeing what was going on. And then it became about where was Lorna. And that's when I really started to clue into, oh my God.
This is just the beginning.
Ah,
Yeah.
this is just the beginning of just sheer, I'll really, the only thing I can think of is disaster. It's really like just putting a bomb in your life and just pieces of it. I mean, this is a little strange maybe, but we're sitting here and it's probably 72 or 73 degrees in this room, and I'm sitting over here and I'm cold. And I'm cold. I'm sitting here about half shivering because that's how it was that day. I feel like I felt that day when you start talking about something like this. I remember how cold it was.
Yeah.
And how, again, the chief of police throwing a jacket on me. He's 3 times my size, and I've got this huge jacket on, but I'm sitting here cold because that's how it felt.
You know, if you'll remember, for about a week or two, you walked around and you kept saying, I'm cold.
Freezing.
You were just freezing. Always had a jacket on in the house.
That's interesting. That's a physiological response to a stressor. And because that is something, anytime you have your sensorial system, is activated in traumatic events, and sometimes it comes along slower in those memories, but it engages that part of your brain that holds on to those memories. And so then later on, when you experience something in that sensory area, it can bring you right back into it, just like it just did now.
Yeah, I need a jacket.
Yeah. I wonder for a person in your line of work, where preparation is everything, what it's like to not be able to prepare ever. Prepare yourself, your heart, your family, and then be a protector, in your role in a family and not be able to protect and, just be there in that moment with your child.
Yeah, so I guess knowing that in that 10 or 15, or maybe it was 30 minutes, I don't know how long, but again, I think it registered with me that I can't help this situation. Rhett's dead, and there was the decision of immediately of, who do you want to come pick him up? And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? But someone was asking, who do you want to come pick him up?
And what was screaming in your head?
What do you mean? Who's going?
Like, nobody ever. I want him with me, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, what? That's the
Yeah, why would they come pick him up?
this is the stupidest question ever. What,
Take him from me?
yeah,
I remember the documentary, and if you haven't seen it, it's on archwayofhope.org. But in the documentary, when we're talking about this, I'm interviewing you, and you're saying, in my line of work, I'm protecting people, helping people, fixing problems. And I remember getting in the truck before David said anything to me, thinking, if I get there fast enough, I'll fix it. I'll fix it. There's not a problem too big that I can't fix. And got to a point where, that paradigm had to switch.
yeah, it really did. And so, to answer both of those questions, it immediately turned to Lorna. It really did. Because I knew that as messed up as I had just become in the last, by now, maybe an hour, Lorna was still not there yet. She had been told that Rhett was hurt and that the folks that had picked her up were taking her to the hospital. So that's what she's believing as she has been picked up in Temple.
And why is she believing that?
Because I think that was my concocted idea. Again, I'm trying to make some of these decisions besides where do you want Rhett to go? Who do you want to pick him up? So that's one decision. The second decision is, what do we tell Lorna? And I have no freaking idea what to tell Lorna. Yeah. Someone finally tells me that she's in Temple with Mara and they are shopping.
To give a little context, that's about 45 minutes away. She's with some friends. Your wife and daughter are with some friends, and so they have a much longer trip to get there than you did.
That's right.
This is around the holidays, right after the holidays. They're just enjoying time off,
Taking a few things back.
Right. Just doing
Kids are out of school.
everyday life.
Yeah, everyday life. And so I knew that whoever's asking me the question, I knew that they couldn't tell her Rhett's dead. So I came up with some idea where I actually got on the phone and flat lied to her. I had regained enough composure to tell her, Lorna, you're going to be picked up and they're going to take you to where Rhett is. And I remember that was the limit of my lie. Yeah, they were going to take her to where Rhett was, but Rhett was at the house.
Mm-hmm.
And she's asking, is everything going to be okay? And I just said, yeah, at some point it'll be okay. I didn't know what to tell her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you couldn't fix the obvious situation, but you were trying your best to fix what was going to come with the survivors.
And she was my greatest concern of survivor.
Rightly so.
Again, because I just knew that whatever I was feeling, that Lorna or any mother who carried that child, who birthed that child, who spent all those nights with that child, I knew whatever I was feeling was going to be magnified by 100 whatever she was going to feel or what I felt like any mother was going to feel. And so I knew what I was going through at the moment, and I thought in the time that she gets here, I got to come up with something. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, there was absolutely nothing I could come up with. I just didn't want her to find out from somebody else.
Yeah. Interestingly, I wonder also in that moment, as the provider, as the dad, as the husband, If you started right then to put yourself on the back burner to begin the process of taking care of all these other people in your life that you knew were going to be so profoundly impacted, that it pushed your grieving process to the side to make sure that everybody else had the opportunity.
Yeah, probably so. Probably so, because again, to me, it goes back to Lorna. And I remember thinking when she showed up and she jumps out of the truck and walks towards me, and I'm standing there and Rhett's not around. And she's asking, he's dead, isn't he? And it just keeps getting louder and louder. He's dead, isn't he? And when I finally say yes, not difficult to imagine, but she falls to the ground and just wailing in agony. And I distinctly remember at that moment, I thought, I'm not very far from watching Lorna being taken away too, and the next time I see her, it's in a hospital. I remember thinking, so if you're around from this area, we're familiar with DePaul. It's a center.
Psychiatric hospital.
You know much better than I do, but that's just all I knew. DePaul. And I remember thinking, as she's on the ground, inconsolable,
I'm going to lose her too.
yeah, I'm going to lose her too. That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did you just lose Rhett, but you just lost your wife too.
My life literally is crumbling before my eyes. Everything that I thought I could expect for the end of this day is totally different in this moment.
Everything that I thought I could control, everything that I thought I could fix by just simply reevaluating and readjusting my work life. I mean, that was my concern. That was my prayer for the day. That was my prayer over my kids that day, just to get things back in balance. And little did I know that you lose Rhett. And for at least that moment, and even, I don't know how long it passed, I thought, I'll lose Lorna too. There's no way to keep her together after this.
What's the one thing that you needed to know in that moment that people that haven't ever experienced this type of loss, that you can maybe provide now? Like, what would that thing be? What would be the most helpful thing that a person either experiencing this recently or haven't been able to work through it yet, or a person that is around, the center of all of this and trying to be a support person for them? What would be that thing?
This sounds very trite, hollow. But if you will hang on moment at a time, and I mean moment could be seconds, it can be minutes, it can be getting through an hour of the day, it can be getting through that day onto the next day. If you can hang on, eventually you'll make it. And when I mean hang on, I mean hang on to those people and to those people that you value the most. Hang on to your wife, hang on to your other kids. That's what it was for me. Let the people who love you, who are around you, let them take care of everything else. You just focus on yourself and those one or two people who are closest to you. Again, it could be your other kids, it could be your spouse, or if you don't have those, then just yourself. But if you can hang on moment at a time, almost breath at a time. And for me, it was faith too. I couldn't leave that out. As much as I screamed and hollered at God and was so angry at God, and all I could believe is how I ended my day with, Lord, bless Ryan, Rhett, and Mara. So, moment at a time, scream and holler at God and know that He's there, that all I can say is you'll make it. You can't give up, but you will make it.
But you will feel like giving up. But don't.
Multiple times.
Don't do it. Don't give in to that.
Yeah, as many folks as you've counseled, I'm sure my story is not unique. It is, moment at a time, don't give up, and knowing that you're going to have to convince yourself of that regularly, because there's a lot of 1 step forward and 2 steps back. There's a whole lot of that.
Would you say that it also is important to save that inner space for people that know you the most and that can really feel this pain with you, but also let you just be?
Great question, because again, I remember asking myself that question. So if Rhett died at 2:30 and I got there at 3, it's winter, so it's getting dark. Word starts to spread. Probably, Paul can give you a better idea, but maybe it's 5:30 by the time word has spread. And I've had a little bit of time to think about that. Oh my God, what do I do? Mm-hmm. What do I do with people? And I gave a close friend a really bad job through my dad, and Paul's over there laughing because he knows. But
you remember this, Paul?
Oh, yeah. So part of our close circle, one of my best friends in the world, Danny Ripley, got the job of vetting people at the gate. Wow. And he didn't have a list. He had nothing other than the word was, Danny, keep everybody away for a little while. But at the same time, Danny knew that there were a few that could get past him and get on through the gate and into the house. And he really didn't have a clue. Looking back, he did a great job. But for me, he was given the task of keeping people away. Because for me, I'm not saying it was right for everybody, but in that moment, we didn't need 500 people around, or however many people around, everybody not knowing what to do or to say, and you don't want to start hearing all the dumb stuff that people say that they don't know it's dumb. We'll get to that at a later time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But
that's a whole podcast itself, right? Yes.
It really is, but,
the things you do not say to somebody who just had a loss.
That's the title to another one. But for me, and for us, it worked well. It was put the gatekeeper. And the gatekeeper has to be someone who's really close, who has an idea of who gets by and who doesn't.
An unspoken idea, a mind-reading idea, and can kind of act as an extension of self.
And so by the night, when the night drags on, Paul is right. He remembers the silence.
Yeah.
Because that's what we needed at the time. There was a group in the living room. My family's really small, so my mom and dad were there. Don't really remember, but I just remember that the room was not packed. It was just your people. And whoever you are, you know who your people are. And
you would do it that way again.
Absolutely.
That was the right choice.
That was the right choice.
To keep it a finite amount.
And then by the next day, you can start letting folks in. You can start letting them in. But for that moment to figure out, where in the hell am I and who am I? Mm-hmm. It's just your people. Yeah. Someone's going to get the really crappy job of trying to figure out who that was. And we laugh about it some now. Danny recalls the people who would show up and they were trying to give the excuse, oh, but I'm such and such, or I'm Ryan's friend, or I'm Mara's friend, and I need to get in. Like, no, sorry. And he was trying to be as accommodating as he can, and Danny
diplomatic.
And that's really not his strong suit.
No, but he's a very kind and sweet person.
Yes, but if you meet him, you'll understand the chuckles.
So what is it? Is he like very direct?
Oh yeah.
Is that, yeah. So he was
exactly
the right.
What he's thinking.
he was the right person for that job then, to be direct and efficient, but also, try to put a soft, demeanor to it. Yeah.
He did a good job.
And what do you remember in that moment?
I remember it slightly different than Jimmy. I remember a small group, but I do remember there being a fairly packed kitchen and den. But for Jimmy and Lorna and the kids, I can imagine that outside of where they were, everything just kind of faded out, because they had their family group. And then although as friends, we feel like we're part of the family too, they were in a place we couldn't understand. And I almost felt like everybody around them were protectors at that moment, just to protect them where they could grieve in that moment as they began this process. They could grieve the way they needed to and didn't have to worry about anything outside of that. So we felt like protectors. I do remember the silence, and I remember, as crazy it is, as it sounds, feeling the presence of God in that moment. Even in the pain of everything and the craziness of everything. It was just an interesting dynamic. I can still take myself back there right now to remember what it was like, but the place that I'd never been before either.
Was it a calm that had come over the space? Or?
It was weird. It was calm, but then maybe Lorna may cry out and say something, and she was free to grieve like she needed to at that time. I think all of you guys were. And nobody freaked out. Everybody just, again, I think we were there to just protect that space so that they could do what they needed to do at that time.
So y'all were the support.
Yeah.
Kind of like the support beams in the house, right? You're just holding things
just holding
above them and around them so that they can
And I'll tell you something else I thought about that I got over really quick when you talk about the space of who's around you and how it grows bigger. I would tell anybody that has to go through something like this, and it doesn't have to be with a child, and that is get over real quick the thought or the idea that you have to make people feel comfortable. I remember having this thought in my mind, well, all these people are coming in, I need to meet them or greet them. Nah, you need to get over that in a really, really big hurry.
Yeah, like the house isn't clean. I don't want all these people here. We didn't,
Or you didn't talk to someone, or you didn't acknowledge that someone, man, you need to get over that in a really, really big hurry. And the people, I don't think they expect that. They don't want that. But that's part of how you feel. You want to be accommodating and thankful, but forget it.
And the people that are in that inner circle, if that is how they're reacting to that, situation that you didn't do enough for them, they probably don't need to be in that inner circle at the time, that's they probably got in accidentally. They somehow duped the person, the gatekeeper. So but it would be important to keep it a very sacred area. And there's also areas that you can retreat. The bedroom can be that space where you say, no, I just need time to be.
I did that a lot. It's
closets. I've heard a lot of closets and cars, spaces like that too, where they just sit in there and the tight, compressed space and silence.
God, so Lorna and I can't believe you'd bring up closets. We spent a lot of time. We have a fairly good-sized closet, but it's still a confined space. And like everybody's closet, there's junk all around the floor. But we would sit, felt like hours on occasions, just sitting in that closet with the door closed. The bedroom, was sacred space too, but the closet, I don't know why you would mention that, but there was something about sitting on the floor of the closet.
So we're multiple years now since the accident. And if you were to look back at the last handful of years, but specifically that day, that week, hindsight's 2020. Is there anything that you say, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have done that, or I shouldn't have done this or that?
Yeah, nothing really jumps in mind that we shouldn't have done, other than, and I still wonder now how people do this, and that is you're asked to make funeral arrangements so quickly after someone's death. And I botched that. I really did. To some extent, I felt like I botched looking back who was going to pick up Rhett, trying to come up with an obituary. If you ask Lorna and, again, Paul and the people close to us, I had to pick a casket, okay? And the casket, y'all, was a disaster.
Yeah, you failed.
The casket was a disaster.
That's a good friend that can tell you failed on your son's casket choices.
But it brought us a chuckle, even at the worst of times, and even Jimmy laughed.
It still does now, too.
Yeah.
It brought y'all all right there.
But yeah, I maybe it's part of our society or something that you're expected to make a bunch of decisions about someone's death and what to do with it.
And rush to the service. We got to get the service here. We got to get the funeral over with.
So I'm hearing you say pause.
Yes, pause.
Pause.
Take more time and think about that, and don't feel pressured. Because I did feel some pressure. It's pressure of the obituary. We got to get people need to know what's going on and where the service is and the timing, and looking back now, I remember this was on a Wednesday that he died, and I think on Thursday, I remember Lorna and I are in my office trying to write an obituary. How stupid is that?
How do you possibly memorialize a life that you thought you were still going to have that day?
Well, the documentary that we're rolling out this week, kid named Jackson, that situation came up, obviously, and they had an uncle who's a trusted uncle that was a pastor as well, and so on and so forth, and they almost arbitrarily just assigned all of that to him, and it's come back, and they're saying that's one of the best things that we did, is give it to someone who could think, a little more clearly than the parents about the situation and trust that they're going to help and do the right thing. And in that situation, it did.
Yeah, I was going to say, though, okay, if you're the type of person who can do that, great. I agree. If you can relinquish that kind of control to someone, but for me, I would never have considered that. Again, it's probably just my makeup and maybe one of my flaws.
I think it's probably more common than not. It is wanting, that's your child, that's your baby, you want to.
Yeah, so if you can't give it up, then I would say pause. You don't need to feel rushed in the next day to come up with an obituary and a bunch of decisions about a funeral. Just pause. If you have that kind of person and you are the kind of person that can delegate that, great, do it. But if you can't, then slow down.
Well, and, in a traumatic moment, I mean, you're talking about your sympathetic system is on high alert. It's activating all of that adrenaline and the things that you have to be able to get ready for a fight, right? That parasympathetic system is the part that starts to bring you back to rest and digest. And that doesn't happen until a bit of time after you're able to come down off of that high alert and that reaction to a traumatic event. Also, simultaneously, you're stuck in this area we call the midbrain, and you can't even get up to the top portion of your brain where that executive functioning is. And the executive functioning is where you make and plan decisions, right?
Yeah, you call it midbrain, and I'm thinking no brain.
Yeah, right. You're like, I was doing my reptilian brain, thank you. I'm just breathing and doing autonomic responses at this point, right? But
on top of not sleeping.
Right. Yeah, everything's just off.
Where does anger come in? Talk to a couple people that get angry at others or the situation, and feel lack of control, and anger is the primary emotion that they feel besides sadness.
Yeah. Well, and that's probably a whole podcast as well, is just those stages of grief. I have theories on that, but originally that Kubler-Ross concept of going through stages of grief and more of a linear format, and we've now not debunked it like it's not worthy of anything. I do feel like you go through all those stages and more, but you go through them different ways and patterns. I don't think it's a linear process. And so literally in that moment, you probably felt, all of those things, anger and denial and depression and, some sense of like acceptance even oddly, and like, okay, well, this is what happened. We've got to keep moving. And then all of a sudden you realize, no, I'm not accepting this. I do not accept it. Push that away. No, you bring my son back right now. I'm not accepting this at all.
Yeah, whether it's me or maybe other guests that we would bring on, that whole stages of grief and the anger piece. Yeah, I have my experiences, but others I'm sure have their own experiences. But I feel it's just like it was in a blender. You just took everything and just hit splurge, and it just a mess.
Spit you out wherever.
Yeah, and it comes in little pieces here, there, everywhere. And you're right, nothing about it is linear.
Yeah. And then you, as we noticed today, the trigger response too, the feeling cold.
Yeah, I finally warmed up again. Is it hot in here? It's like it's 85 now all of a sudden. We got past that moment. I've taken my proverbial coat back off.
Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't stop. And that's the part that makes it so hard in the way that we're taught to grieve in America, is that you're supposed to kind of be done with it within 3 to 5 days, like, okay, now it's time to get over it. It's time to go back to work, time to do life again. And how many years later are you still becoming cold when you talk about it?
7.5.
So do you get over it?
No, never. But and again, I can't wait to talk about what you just talked about one day on this podcast of the way we are taught to grieve in America, and especially I think it's worse for men. I think even as men, we are taught, shove it and move on. I mean, box it up, can it, put it away, and get on. And I would like to think that as a society, we're changing in a good way from that. But yeah, that's a problem.
Well, I think one podcast at a time, right?
Yeah.
Being able to bring some depth and awareness to it's okay and acceptance to exactly what you feel is okay to feel. However you feel that.
You just got to hope that the people around you have some understanding to allow you to grieve in a way that may be more than 3 days and get on with it.
And if they don't, then maybe that's a telltale sign too of some changes that needed to occur long ago, long before this moment in time.
That's right.
But yeah.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can like and share, would be awesome. Visit us at our website, archwayofhope.org. We're on all social channels. You can follow us there. Our intent is to share solid information with people that are needing to hear this information and provide hope for those who have lost someone too early.